So one of the questions I get asked an awful lot after I do a Queen tribute gig is about the guitar. How did you get one that was so like Brian's, etc., etc.? Now, a quick Google search will answer that question for you. But the other question I get asked is, what do all the switches do? And why are you always using this? So this is really how Brian May uses the guitar to do most of the stuff that you hear on stage. And you know, the most important control on the guitar is actually the volume control because it's always getting changed. If you listen to a sparkly clean tone, that's with the volume just really, really low, and it gives a really bright, clean sound. And what's actually happening is the amps are getting crucified. They're getting pounded within an inch of their lives with a treble booster. They're on full volume. They're not meant to do that. They're meant to be sparkly clean. So to actually make it clean again, you have to reduce the volume of the guitar. So that's why that is so important. He hasn't used his tone control in a very long time, if ever. So right now there's only a little sort of a screw in there because he has a very special volume pot that Nigel Knight of Cat Audio has made for him that enables him to get the clean tones a little easier. Now, I don't feel the need for that personally because the way my setup is, it's perfectly fine just to lower it down. I can find that spot fairly quickly on stage. But let's have a look at the pickups and what the switches do, because that's where it really gets strange, because I don't really know of a guitar that really does what this does. And there's probably good reasons for that, because unless you look at the totality of Brian's rig, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. So in other words, if you had one of these guitars and you weren't using a treble booster, they'd be very odd sounds. But let's have a look. These are single coils, Burns Trisonics. These particular ones are made by Edison, who has now retired, I believe. But you can get excellent copies of the ones that are on Brian's guitar from Yonder Bosk, and I might actually be replacing these very soon with Yonder Bosks, and we'll have a look at the differences then. But let's have a look at the switches. Each of these switches on the top row is an on-off switch. So in other words, if I do this where they're all up, there's no sound because the guitar pickups are all turned off. Now, the bottom row is where it gets particularly interesting because these are phase switches. So if I have two or more pickups on, I can put pickups out of phase with each other. So this guitar is series wired. So what that basically means is that if I put these two pickups on and I set one of them, it doesn't matter which, out of phase with the other one, it cancels out. In other words, this one is subtracted from this one, if you like. And that creates some very interesting sounds that are really signature to this guitar. Let's have a look at some of the most popular ones. So the one that Brian uses the most throughout Queen's tours and gigs and a lot of the recordings is actually these two pickups together. This is the meat and potatoes and vegetables dinner of the guitar. And what this is basically doing, it's a bit like a very wide humbucker because they are spaced fairly wide apart, but they are together in phase, and if I put the volume up full, we'll get a very familiar sound. And when he's doing his clean sound, it's actually these two together in phase with the volume turned down. It gives that nice sort of glassy, clean sound. So this is the most important one. I did that with the volume up. He very actually rarely has the volume fully up. When he's playing rhythm parts, it can be basically anywhere really, just to get a sort of a more cleaner sound. So this is it with that 3/4. And you can hear that. I'm playing reasonably complex chords. They're not just root fifths, but all of the sounds can be heard in the chord, which is very unusual for a distorted guitar sound. It's a trick he learned from Irish guitarist Rory Gallagher, so you should always trust Irish guitarists. They usually have a good insight. Subscribe. Anyway, let's have a look at the rest of them. Now, another common enough one is this one on its own. Now, on the original recording of Killer Queen, the second part of the solo was just this one. And it gives I play all of the solo and it gives a particular type of sound that's kind of stratty. Nice and warm and plummy. Okay, now let's have a look at the next one, and that's both of these together. I actually have never picked out a Queen song where he's used these together, but I've had my suspicions that when he layers up rhythm guitars, he'll do that, and this creates a kind of a humbucker. Now, at some point in the guitar's history, and I'm sure somebody more well-knowledge than I will advise on this, the polarity of the middle pickup, or was it the bridge pickup? One of these two pickups was changed. I presume it was the middle pickup actually, but I'm open to discussion on that. I think it happened in the early 80s, not entirely sure. But what actually happened when he did that is that if I put these two together, out of phase with each other, they're not humbucking anymore. There's a reason for that, and we'll come to that in a moment. But it gives a very plummy sort of humbucker sound. It may have been the one perhaps that was used on a kind of Magic for the those sort of parts. Not entirely sure, but it's a very uncommon one for him to use, possibly because it's no longer humbucking. Now, here's the next most common one, which is, I'm now going to flip one of these out of phase. It doesn't matter which. Now, when I'm playing the show, because I don't use these two together in phase, and I generally use this one with something out of phase, I tend to leave this one permanently out of phase. So that's with this switch up, if you like, whereas the other ones are in the other direction. And when I put the two of those out of phase, I get the real signature sound of this guitar, I suppose, which is the screaming sort of real iconoclastic sound, and you've heard it so many times. It's in Bohemian Rhapsody. It's in Somebody to Love. And it's actually used sometimes for rhythm parts. I suppose the one that really has it is Dragon Attack, because it does have that kind of funky sort of break in it. So I think he backs the volume a little bit down and you get this. And of course then, very high harmonic sound. Now, when you play this with a normal gained up amplifier without a treble booster, it tends to be a little bit shrill, but because the Vox is at the edge of its life, there's a type of compression that comes in that rounds off the shrillness, if that makes sense. Plus the treble booster he's using, it's not like the Range Master that people always use. It doesn't have as quite of the shrill sort of past 12 kilohertz type of treble detail in it. So you can hear that it really compresses into a very enjoyable type of sound, even though it is quite bright. Now, moving along, there is another one that uses this one out of phase with this one that happens quite a bit as well. Now, when Brian plays Crazy Little Thing Called Love nowadays, he doesn't bother getting out a Telecaster. In times past, the guitar tech would have the Telecaster for the solo. So these days, he tends to use these two out of phase to simulate that Telecaster. So it's like a... So it is kind of like a Telecaster, because it's basically like this pickup has had this one taken out of it, if you like, or the other way around, and it creates a very nice sort of single coil bridge, single coil type of sound. It does have other uses though, and for this one I'm going to go down to my floorboard because I wasn't clever enough. Now, if I just turn this up about 3/4, so these are these two out of phase, I get this. As heard and beloved in Keep Yourself Alive. There'll be another amazing cut here while I turn the chorus back on. You should never have chorus and phaser on at the same time. Okay, so those are actually the more common ones, and those are the ones that I would use in the gig that I play with. I actually also use this one on its own for sort of a kind of a quasi-clean tone for the start of Crazy Little Thing Called Love, because it seems to work for that. Now, beyond that, there are some more esoteric ones, and that's involving these ones, or in fact all three. Very often, and I've seen Brian do this because, look, we all have a moment where we kind of get caught out on stage. He'll have these two on as his main sound, and if he wants the out of phase sound, he'll have this one already set out of phase, but he'll just kick it in. So in other words, you'll have the normal humbucker, and then if you introduce this one, this now is subtracted from these two, if you like. And you get this kind of a variant of the sort of the classic out of phase sound that you get from these two. But it's very much thicker, it does not as shrill. Sometimes it's more enjoyable. Now, where I've come to use this is that I have a very dangerous part in our gig, which is during the solo for Hard Life. And I very often miss it, truth be told. It's a very difficult part. The solo starts with the volume back down and gently picking. And then you have to bring the volume back up. And here's the the dangerous part. The next section is played with an out of phase sound. Now, if you're clever, you can get two of them and flip them like that, but you're also already playing that bend and doing vibrato on it, so you mightn't always make it. So a good workaround is just to jump that one in. So I'll just do that section again. And so on. So that's another common enough one, but it's more of a cheat than an actual sort of canonical tone. Now there's another one that he uses which is unusual. Sometimes, now again, more learned people can correct me if I'm wrong, but to my ear I sometimes hear this one on its own for clean passages, and there's another one that's related to it, which is these two out of phase, which he has confessed to have used on some clean passages. And I did use it recently on a cover on the solo for My Life Has Been Saved. I'll link that so you can hear it below, because if I start playing it here I might not make any money from this video. Not that I'll ever make any money from any video. But in any case, if I put those two out of phase and just give a sort of a clean sound by just gently raising the volume. Lovely glassy sound, and with the sort of 80s sort of chorus dry mix, you get this, you know, it's nearly, but it's not the one he does use for the... It could be used for that, but generally he uses it a lot in the 80s for sort of clean picked passages, which were kind of the fashion at the time, you know. So yeah, pretty cool. Now on its own though, it's very shrill, but not without its charm. Okay, now I'm going to return to one more. I'm going to go back to this one, because one thing I did forget to mention about this one is that this one does get used an awful lot in Brighton rock, you know, for those sort of what would you say, sort of pentatonic passages. So it does have a nice bit of girth to it for that as well. So that's kind of what they all do. Now, other possibilities, I'm not a mathematician, I'm sure there might be some that I missed, but generally speaking, they all have probably had some use somewhere, because one thing that I might get to cover at some stage is the orchestrations piece. When you get a D-key amp and you start layering up different parts and you start experimenting with different parts with different pickup selections, the sound can get quite rich and quite bold quite quickly. So that'd be another use for it. But generally speaking at the gig, it's this in its own, this and this out of phase, these two, and sometimes these two out of phase, which is still a lot, but you know, it's not, you know, a crucifixion of a gig trying to flip between at least those few and trying to remember other ones. So that's the top tip on the switches. If there's any questions, post them below and I'll try and answer them with a short or some sort of other clever comment.